For the Lord of the Rings fans out there, none shall pass on getting this statue for their shelf. Here's your look at the brand new McFarlane Toys Movie Maniacs Lord of the Rings Gandalf the Grey. From the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, comes the new Movie Maniacs figure of Gandalf the Grey from McFarlane Toys. This highly detailed, limited edition figure displays the memorable character in his grey robes. The future of civilization rests in the fate of one ring, which has been lost for centuries. Powerful forces are unrelenting in their search for it, but fate has placed it in the hands of a young hobbit named Frodo Baggins, who inherits the ring and steps into the legend. A daunting task lies ahead for Frodo when he becomes the ring bearer to destroy the one ring in the fires of Mount Doom, where it was forged. Cringeworthy openers aside, that was terrible. I'm so sorry for that. Let's grab, though, the tape measure and see how tall Gandalf the Grey stands. Now, in this case, the statue, because I keep wanting to call these guys figures, but there's really no posability for them. Either way, though, Gandalf is about 6.5 inches in height, or it's going to be about 17 centimeters tall. Making good on our promises. Here's what Gandalf the Grey looks like with Sloth from the Goonies. Here's what the figure also looks like. Now, what a trilogy this is. Here's what the figure also looks like with Alan Gardner from The Hangover. A weird cast, a weird selection of movie maniacs this wave around. And the only one, again, I would really consider to be a true movie maniac, in my personal opinion at least, is Sloth from Goonies. Maybe not as much for Alan Gardner, and not as much for Gandalf the Grey either. Going through Gandalf's many goodies, first the statue comes included with a curved cardboard backdrop of the Balrog. This right away is my first issue I have with the statue, is that they chose this to be the backdrop for what looks to be just a Shire version of Gandalf the Grey. This, of course, is the scene that Gandalf is going to be fighting the Balrog in Khazad-dûm. Unfortunately with that, though, is by using this backdrop, it doesn't really match, though, the statue that's going to be in front of it. By the way, before we actually get to looking at that, the backdrop with the Balrog, lots of bees, does actually come with these clear acrylic curved pieces that go not only to the top of it, but also to the bottom as well. Once those are fitted in place, even though it really did stand fine on its own, it kind of gives just a little more of a stabilizing feature, and it also frames the backdrop nicely. Yeah, the real issue I have with this, and I'll pick up Gandalf first before we kind of look at the rest of the figure's accessories, is that this specific version of Gandalf looks to be more based, again, on the base that he's standing on top of. Looks like he's actually coming from the Shire, not necessarily inside Khazad-dûm. Of course, you do have the Lord of the Rings placard there on the front. And also, Gandalf, when he was battling the Balrog, didn't even have his hat on. And he was actually carrying around, I believe, 2 of his scepters in hand. And I don't even think the sword was drawn. But anyways, either way, Gandalf Grey did not actually have his hat on when he was battling the Balrog. I think rather what I would have done instead, and maybe given us a later version of Gandalf the Grey where he's battling the Balrog, and maybe even have that familiar pose that he has, that famous pose, where he's holding both scepters in hand. I much rather instead I would have just included, I think, a backdrop featuring the Hobbit Shire, as I think that would have been making more sense, based at least on this particular character's pose and look. Either way, though, the figure comes included with a trading card. Now, again, like this looks to be more like, of course, the statue. He's not clearly battling a Balrog in this image. Down below, we've got Gandalf the Grey, and if you flip it around to the back, out of the Certificate of Authenticity's listed numbers of 14,500, the one here is actually 1,047. The run that they have is actually high enough, at least, and I don't think it's going to ever make these super rare. If you are looking still to track down the Movie Maniacs and you haven't had yet the chance to do so, I think at 14,500, you should still be easy to find these figures. Now, again, like this does also come with the silver placard that does have the Lord of the Rings there featured on the front, and again, you've got the Warner Brothers 100 down below. If you flip it around, though, to the back, you'll notice that there's rectangular shapes on the top, and of course there's slots in the top of those that you then just take yourself the card and slide that in place. And then you've got yourself a little standee. Now, again, I've already mentioned this in the other 2 reviews that I did of Alan and also Sloth, that if you wanted to have it displayed like this, by all means, all the power to you. Or what I like to do also as well is flip this around and show sort of more the Certificate of Authenticity. It kind of makes me feel like more of a prized part of your collection, not necessarily something that's going to be mass produced, even though really, again, like 14,500, there's a lot of these really going around. The other thing that it does, of course, come included with, like all the other cases of Movie Maniacs, is it does come included with a question mark box. I had promised I have not yet opened this, and it does feel, sort of by how much space it's occupying inside, that it's probably going to be like a poster. Now let's open this up and see what we got inside. Yeah, okay, so it seems to be a poster. Or, one better, it seems to be a map. Now, actually, if that's the idea, providing, of course, I can open all of this without tearing this, I think, honestly, the map makes more sense. Maybe a poster would have been fine to be displayed, but honestly, though, if you're one that is a big fan of Lord of the Rings, for example, and would really just like a map of Middle-earth, there's less really of these, I think, going around than actually movie posters. Providing, of course, you can overlook the fact that there's all these, obviously, crease lines now in this because this simply has just now been folded up. I think it's really, again, a nice representation of the map. Something that if you could find a way to kind of smooth this out, maybe put a couple of blocks or books on top of this, yeah, you can easily frame that and put that in display, maybe in your office. So right now, I'm just going to move that aside because, of course, that's not the real reason why you guys came to this review. I'd like to think that what was inside that question mark box wasn't the reason why you came to this review. Okay, I see a couple of people already leaving the room. Okay. Moving these, though, out of the way, the questionable backdrop of the Balrog, and we'll also move aside the certificate of authenticity, picking up Gandalf the Grey and getting a closer look at him. I haven't yet mentioned this in the review, but one thing I have a real problem with when it comes to these movie maniacs, maybe not as much the selection of what the characters that they chose, but another thing is the fact that these are always really hard to remove. You may have already seen from the way I've unboxed some of these in earlier reviews, that when you get to about this area, they're usually encased in clear plastic. I usually have, and some people have actually asked me, how do you actually go about going and cutting and removing these from inside their clamshell case? Well, yeah, I don't really have a technique necessarily. All I did was really just cut the plastic, the clear plastic right here, and then sort of just pry it on either side, just enough that I can actually pull the character out from the underside of the tray. Gandalf, though, had an unfortunate happy accident because the figure actually, the removable, well, this part of the base actually did remove. I don't think it's supposed to remove. It doesn't necessarily look like there was a little bit of glue here to the side, but unlike Harry Potter that we looked at before, nothing was necessarily broken on it. It just came off as two separate pieces. And again, I have to stress that I'm sure they're not supposed to be separate like this, but a happy accident it was either way, because I was able to at least take the bottom off the clear tray and then pull Gandalf from the top. Just putting the two together, I suppose I probably could add a little bit of glue, but honestly, I mean, just to hold it from this, it seems to stay fine onto the actual display base, which again, we'll quickly look at. The base itself has some nice green that they've added to the foliage of, again, I feel to be the Shire. You get the front placard there that does say Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. Of course, from that, you've got yourself a fairly nice looking sculpt, I feel, of Gandalf the Grey. The colors are really well handled here. You got a fairly pale complexion for Gandalf, although they've added some really nice darker red around the areas of his eyes and cheek. The darker coloring of his beard also works quite well. I think that they chose a good color where it doesn't look too fake or phony. I think that's a good color matching like he would have had in the movie as well. Now, of course, he does have the hat on top of his head. It's not removable. It's basically really none of this figure is removable. I thought for a second maybe that the sword could be unsheathed, but that's not the case either. He does have, of course, the sword sheath on the side of his body, and he also has himself a little wizard's pouch there also on the front. He's carrying around, of course, his scepter. This is not something that can be removable either, and it is fairly detailed. I probably think that they could have added just a little bit of coloring on the end of it so it looks like he's actually using a spell or summoning some of his magic, but unfortunately it doesn't have any color other than just the brown. I do like the coloring of the robe. It's a nice darker gray, and then amongst the gray they sort of add sort of the wrappings that he has on the back of his cloak, and this is kind of more of a darker bronze color, so there is some nice separation between the two. It doesn't look simply like they just molded and casted all the same plastic. While there is certainly a lot of gray happening for Gandalf the Grey, I think it's a well-sculpted looking statue. I still have to kind of question the choice that they went with Gandalf fighting the Balrog as the backdrop scene, but I think if you can overlook that, it's a really nice looking statue. Now again, like there's no articulation at all to speak of for these. There's no articulation in the head, none for the arms, the hands, anything along those lines. Essentially, you're going into this. I like to think that you're going into this with the idea in mind that you're buying yourself a statue, not necessarily a posable figure. And then one last time, of course, we can bring back in the Balrog backdrop, which again seems a little out of place, obviously seems really out of place when you look at the base that he's standing on top of, and you look at the fact that this version of Gandalf does still have his hat on top of his head, which again doesn't really make much sense. And of course then bringing the other movie maniac figures we've already had a look at. Here's of course Alan, and on the other side of course there's Sloth. Nice looking figures. Still, though, I probably would have renamed the whole banner of calling this movie Maniacs. I'd mentioned maybe, I think in the review of Alan, that maybe what they should have probably done is called this like Pop Sculpture, a play on culture and sculpture. But other than that, I think I really am liking the movie Maniacs so far. Now we're only, of course, the second wave in. We've already had a look at the first wave that consists of, again, like the Wicked Witch of the West. We also had one statue I've yet to look at from Movie Maniacs Series 1 was the Bugs Bunny. Still trying to track that one down just so I can actually say that I've completed all of the first wave. But we've looked at all the first wave, including the Ted Lasso, the Wicked Witch of the West. Harry Potter also was one there as well. Like, again, like the choicing of the characters don't make much sense to me as to why they would have chose these specific characters. I still feel like of the three that we've looked at, Sloth fits, I think, the best profile of being a true movie maniac. Maybe not, again, the Hangover's Alan, and maybe not as much, though, for Lord of the Rings, Gandalf the Grey. If you can separate yourself from the idea that these have to be movie maniacs and following in the footsteps of the classic line that we got before from McFarlane's team, I think they're actually nice looking statues, ones that look great on the shelf if you get the chance to pick up these for yourself. Now, if you're one that likes to shop outside the Shire and pick up the new Movie Maniac figures for yourself, they go on average most online sites at $25.99 a piece, or about $26. I would imagine, though, in the wild, if you check these out at your local brick and mortar stores, that the price will probably be about the same. $26 I don't think is too bad, considering you're getting a very detailed, well-painted statue. They don't have, granted, any articulation, but if you go into it knowing exactly what you're getting from this line, I think you're still going to be walking away pretty happy with what you're getting. Questionable, though, the fact that they did choose a Balrog backdrop to go along with what seems to be a Shire Gandalf the Grey. But other than that, I did like the way that this one turned out. And I think of the accessories, and I use the quotations accessories because, again, most of the time they're either stickers or posters. I think of at least of the three that we've looked at of this newest wave, Gandalf might have the best accessory because at least he gets a map of Middle-earth. A poster of Fellowship of the Ring would have been nice, but I think a map of Middle-earth is even nicer. What do you guys think of Gandalf the Grey? Let me know down below in the comments section. And have you been collecting any of the Movie Maniacs, both Wave 1 and Wave 2? If you have, let me know down below in the comments section which one is your favorite in your collection. Also, as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit it with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more Movie Maniacs or not, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification. Popping up also at the very end of this video will be, of course, some more McFarlane toy reviews and a playlist. It may not all be Movie Maniac related, but it'll be at least all the stuff I've looked at from McFarlane Toys ever since this channel started. What, 14, 15? How long have we been doing this? We've been doing this a long time. There's definitely going to be a lot more Movie Maniac, more McFarlane reviews coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.